Now, this is an interesting question. Is the Raiden Shogun the worst Archon in terms of writing? This is an opinion that I have expressed over the past couple of years, even down to my very brief analysis of Raiden Shogun, and what I mean by that is it wasn't just the Raiden Shogun that was bad per se in terms of writing, but more so in general, the Archon quests, the string of Archon quests in Inazuma. Because by that point, we already had Mondstadt and Liyue's quest, which for what they were supposed to be in, and considering how early and considering how this was the first string of quests that we do have for the game for about a year or so, and we did have like a few quests here and there that align with the Archon quest, and we have the interlude quests, and then the quests with Dainsleif. And for the most part, they were pretty good. Those quests were pretty good for what they're worth. And I did get a bit excited when we finally got to experience Inazuma, not just with the quests, but it's just that, but also just explore the area and all that. One thing that I will defend regarding Inazuma is the fact that that Inazuma is fun to explore, but more than anything, the world quests of Inazuma were friggin' fantastic. I will like defend that in the sense that when you go and partake in those quests, with some of the quests especially, you get to experience the transformation of Inazuma. It almost feels like that as the player character, you are doing something. You are essentially changing the landscape of Inazuma. What was once thought to be uninhabitable or anything of the sort, as the player character, you do change the very landscape of Inazuma, and that is something that I will wholeheartedly commend the devs and writers for, because those quests, bangers, absolute bangers. Even more so compared to Sumeru and Fontaine, and that's saying a lot considering how well those quests were as well. The Archon quests, on the other hand, it's a different story entirely. I don't necessarily enjoy the Inazuma quest. I won't say they're bad. In the context of Genshin Quest, it's one of the weaker ones. But considering the quality of quests that we did end up getting before and after, it's not bad. It's disappointing. That's more how I felt about Inazuma in general. It's just that more could have been done with that. And the fact that they had this 3-act structure for Inazuma, it does leave a lot to be desired regarding how the characters of the game would be interpreted as, how the Raiden Shogun would be interpreted as, and don't get me started with Kokomi. Kokomi almost felt worthless. If anything, it'd probably be better for her not to do anything. But that's a story for a different time. For the Raiden Shogun, well, which is the basis of this video, without watching the video, I'm just going to say, compared to the likes of Venti, Zhongli, and especially Farina and Nahida, I am very biased because Venti is one of the first Archons that we have encountered in Mondstadt, so he does have a special place in a lot of people's hearts, including my own. Farina is a character that I was at first not considering to pull, but the more information that we get from her, whether it's in the form of of the drip fed content that we did end up getting in the lead up towards the Fontaine, and then her drip marketing that we did get through her trailers or anything of the sort, and then getting into her quests. It's tough competition, and don't get me started with Nahida either, because prior to Farina, Nahida was my favorite one. She's definitely a favorite, more than Zhongli, more than Venti. As for Zhongli, the character is great. He's great. So when you consider the amount of characters, well, the archons that we have been getting before and after Raiden, she's decent. But here's the thing: she does come with baggage. She does come with catches. You can't really say that much compared to Venti or Zhongli or Nahida or Farina. Raiden is the only one that I know of that is a decent character, but with a catch. Still dying on the hill that Inazuma isn't that bad. I mean, leeway exists. Leeway exists, but it did leave an impact. I want to see remake Inazuma add a few more cutscenes. Not just add a few cutscenes, but here's the thing: even if we were to add a few more cutscenes to the Inazuma questline in general, you're still gonna be stuck with a few things here and there. Like example, Kokomi's story ain't exactly that compelling. If anything, I think Inazuma doesn't just need a remake. It needs a friggin' overhaul just to make the story be on par with the other quest lines. So this is a video made by Otsukuri. So big shout outs and all that.
Is the Raiden Shogun a bad character?
Oh, sorry about the audio?
No, she's not. If we're talking meta-wise, you would have to be insane to think that she's bad. Unless
yeah, not wrong. Here's the thing. Raiden Shogun, in terms of gameplay, best one. I don't think, even after the other Electro characters that we did end up receiving, Raiden is just the best one. No doubt about it. I don't even think Cloranda is going to upstage her, or any other future Electro character would upstage her anytime soon. So in terms of power level, you're high if you think she's weak.
Unless you're one of those poor souls who doom posted her on launch and somehow refused to acknowledge that she is probably one of the most powerful units in the game right now.
Not only, but but here's the thing. I remember that there was a bit of a controversy regarding Raiden where she wasn't able to team up with Beto because her burst she can't synergize with Beto. There we go. That's the word I was looking for. And she wasn't able to synergize with Beto all that much, which is stupid. I will still say it is still stupid that it's still not possible to do. Like I still haven't forgotten Hoyoverse. I still haven't forgotten. Raiden could still do work even without the synergizing.
But whether or not she was a good character in the story was something that was always up for debate. The Raiden Shogun, or A if you will, is an extremely polarizing character in terms of writing. People either love her or they hate her, even to this day. Not only was she the first female waifu Archon introduced to us, but she was also the first Archon who wanted us dead. She was also actively harming the citizens of Inazuma in her pursuit of said eternity. At least that was what was happening when we got to Inazuma. While the Fatui did play a major role in destabilizing Inazuma, it is also later revealed that A willingly turned a blind eye towards almost the entire thing. And after the whole civil war that caused the deaths of countless Inazumans, we didn't really get to see A being held accountable for her actions. And I feel like the whole mess that was 2.1 spacing gave A the reputation of a badly written character that wasn't held accountable because she's a waifu, but I actually don't think this is true. But before we get into that, let's get into why people think A, at least when compared to the other 3 Archons that we know, is terrible. The badly paced Inazuma Archon quest.
Yeah, that's the major thing. I'd say that because of the way that the Inazuma questline was structured, aside from maybe 1 or 2 quests that involve the Raiden Shogun with her story quest, there really isn't a lot of characterization for Raiden to become a sympathetic character in the time frame that was given. It was just badly paced up compared to even before Inazuma. After, if I remember correctly, I think once Sumeru was released, they did a new they did a new quest structure, right? I think it's up to 5 acts now. I think that's what they did.
As a day one player and massive
Well,
weeb, I
hold on
was
though.
looking forward to Inazuma a lot. The game had already left us multiple hints that the Inazuman Archon, Bal, wasn't going to be as friendly as Venti or Zhongli and is currently doing questionable things to her people. And when we got to Inazuma, we got to see that the things were indeed pretty bad. The Sakoku decree was in place, which, if you don't remember what that means, is that the borders of Inazuma is essentially closed, save for the Fatui and several Snezhnayan merchants who can travel freely due to their diplomatic ties. The only other way to get out of Rito as a foreigner is to get yourself a travel permit. And as you can probably imagine, this harms Inazuma's economy greatly. And on top of that, through Ayaka and Toma, we got to see firsthand how the Vision Hunt decree was affecting the vision holders in Inazuma. Despite vision holders being a very, very small percentage of the Inazuma population, the game made it clear that a lot of people were suffering from the Vision Hunt decree, the Sakoku decree, and just how bad the state of Inazuma was when we got there.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, for some characters in this game, if they were to have their visions taken away, I don't fully remember what exactly happens because it has been such a long time, but it almost feels like as if they're losing, they just lost a piece of themselves. Yeah, here we go. How could I have forgotten something so important to me? As I think about it, when my vision was taken from me, it felt like I suddenly been hollowed out. It's almost like a piece of them has been taken away. Almost like losing a sense of purpose. I guess that's the best way of explaining it. So for the Raiden Shogun to take away what's essentially part of a person, that's kind of fucked up. I don't think there's any nice way of putting it. It's just screwed up. It's just messed up and all that. You're basically taking away a part of what makes a person a person. You're just taking away the hopes and dreams of like well, not necessarily the hopes and dreams, but a person's worth, a person's place in Tevat, and in some instances that could be worse than death. It's a cruel thing.
There, not long after, we get to the Resistance and we get to see up close what the Civil War was like in Yashiori Island. And let's not forget that that's an entire island that's inhabitable because of the war caused by the Vision Hunt decree. We got to see the horrors of war and how innocent people were getting caught in the crossfire of war, losing their homes and family, as they often do in real life. And by the end of the second act, it was crystal clear that the Shogun was causing harm to her people. Say what you want about the Inazuma Archon quest, but the first two acts were good. They were actually really good. The build-up for both the Shogun, the Tenryou Commission, the Resistance was executed really, really well, only for it to implode in the very last act.
Yeah, honestly, even I can admit this. After I did my 1 year later video on Genshin, there was a question that I was tossing around here and there. Yeah, this was especially after the Sumeru quest line, where would would the Inazuma quest line benefit from a 5-act structure the same way that Sumeru did it, and the same way that Fontaine did? For the most part, I'd probably say yes. I'd probably say it probably would have benefited from a 5-act structure compared to the 3-act structure that Inazuma was stuck with. There would need to be more things added to it, obviously. All I can do is just wonder what those other elements should be included without feeling too bloated. Like, let's say, for example, the prison arc in in the Fortress of Meripede during the Fontaine quest line. So it's something that I have been struggling to wonder as to whether or not it should have been, if the quest line would have been saved in some way if they adhered to a 5-act structure instead of a 3-act structure. There's a chance. I think even if there was a 5-act structure, they probably still would be in the same situation where the business side of things probably be would still meddle into the creative aspect of Genshin, because remember, the Raiden Shogun came out in, I believe, either 2.1 or 2.2, and considering that the publishers, not, I don't know if it's the devs idea or if it's the publisher's idea or if it's the business aspect of Genshin that's doing this, the business side of Hoyo, I should probably say, that they needed to get the Raiden Shogun out as soon as possible, just so that way they could rake in the money that an Archon could potentially get. So the 3-act structure definitely made a hindrance towards well, not necessarily that, but more like, it did make me wonder though, because especially considering how complex Inazuma really is in terms of politics and world building, especially compared with Mondstadt and Leewood. So that's more or less one of the reasons why I would think that a 5-act structure would probably benefit the Inazuma quest line. But then again, I don't know if if the business side of things would even want that to happen. So it's hard to say.
Not only did the third act force the Fatui was behind everything plot without any proper build-up other than one mention of Senora in Rito, and then making Kokomi seem incompetent in the process.
Yeah, Kokomi being incompetent. Hey, look, I get it. I know she's not meant to be like a general or any of the sort. She says that she's a strategist, but to be quite honest, there isn't that much strategy going on with whenever Kokomi's around.
They also tried to make me care about an NPC in the span of 20 minutes. I think Teppei is a terribly written NPC. You can come for me for this, but his death literally made me feel nothing. I mean, I felt bad for the guy, but I barely knew him. And at that point, I realized the writers were trying to do too much all at once by shoving all of these different storylines in one act. And mind you, the third act of Inazuma only lasted 2.5 hours.
Well, approximately. I think if one were to split this up into maybe 2 acts, it probably would have been better paced, because it seems like that they were trying to do so much in the third act. It feels very It's like this. It's like this. Imagine an ocean of ideas that you have, but the ocean, but considering how stretched out that ocean is, and all those ideas that you have that you want to implement in said ocean, they're without any real cohesion. You're not gonna get much out of it. And it's why I think that the quests after this one, regarding Sumeru and Fontaine, were so, well, more so as Sumeru than Fontaine. But Sumeru managed to pace its storyline far better compared to what came before.
Compare that to Sumeru's last act, which is Act 5, which took almost like double that amount, almost 4 hours. And after meeting Scaramouche, Fatui Bad, and a brief training arc with Yae Miko, which I can't even call an arc because it was one training session. It lasted a day. We made our move to infiltrate Tenshukaku, where we immediately faced off against Signora. Saw her get obliterated within seconds, and then we fight A, and through the power of Nakana, we managed to defeat her and change her mind. Okay, maybe I'm undermining the story a lot here, but that was what I felt when I first played through it in the...
It's not wrong, honestly. I mean, say what you will, but the devs were trying to do as much as they can, try to cram in as much content as possible in Act 3, but they haven't fleshed it out enough to make a big enough impact compared to what came before and after, especially after. That's more or less how I felt with with the quest lines that particular act. Inazuma crawled so Sumeru and Fontaine can sprint. Yeah, I guess it had to be one nation. May as well be Inazuma.
The 2.1 update, there were genuinely intriguing moments that stood out to me immediately too, like when we learned how the Shogun is actually a puppet, and how there are two archons in Inazuma, and how deep the corruption was in Inazuma, and an idea of the political landscape of Inazuma as we follow around
Oh yeah, and Sarah. Oh yeah, and Sarah was like found dead in a ditch.
Josara. Kazuha deflecting the Musono Hitotachi was also
Yeah, look at me with a straight face and say that Sarah did as much as she could.
an amazing payoff to his and his dead friends storyline. It remains one of my favorite moments in the game to this day. And finally, confronting A herself. Everything was so hype, I was so ready to confront A, only to learn that she was well aware of what the Shogun puppet was doing the entire time. At least she had an idea what the puppet was doing to her people, and she didn't care.
Sarah versus Ignora, Mr. Satan versus Cell. More like Cell versus Yamcha.
Or she just didn't care enough to interfere unless it directly correlates to eternity. She basically said that if it's not about eternity, then I don't want to hear it, bitch. Making sure everything stayed in stasis was A's way to ensure that she didn't have to go through any more losses like she did 500 years ago during the cataclysm. It was, in a way, her own way to cope with her intense grief of losing her friends and sister. At that point, it was revealed in her character trailer that she lost two of her best friends essentially at the same time, Mikoshi Chiyo and Kitsune Saigu. And then, around the same time, she also lost Makoto, which is why she did what she did right after. But at the time, the game didn't really touch on it too much. They briefly mention how A is suffering from loss in a cutscene, and I think that's it. But then, through the power of ambition, like collective ambition, we managed to change our mind, at least about the Vision Hunt decree, not about everything else. Yet. And we conclude the Inazuma Archon quest with A saying that she needs time to think on which direction she will take Inazuma going forward, which brings us to her story quest, the first one.
Oh yeah, this one. Yeah, for a lot of people, I remember that the complaints regarding A's first story quest is just you're just walking around and just doing what would essentially be considered just menial tasks, menial like quests, so to speak. I'll defend this one. I will defend the first A quest. Yes, what you're doing is inconsequential, but I think that's the point of the quest. After 500 years of isolation, she's now exposed to everyday life 500 years later, and it's through that experience that A has finally gained, in the same way that Zhongli and the other gods, so to speak, has seen Liyue the way it is today compared to, let's say, 100 years ago, 500 years ago, century, millennia, however long it takes. They understand that that they should let the people do what they want to do with no oversight. In that same respect, A looks at everyday life in Inazuma, and it's those moments that would help change A's mind on the decree, on the pursuit of eternity of sorts. So yes, I will defend this one. There's no doubt on my mind that it's the catalyst of what would come after.
probably a lot of other people expected was to see how A would grow as a character and how she would take accountability for her actions in the Archon quest. After all, we did manage to change her mind about the Vision Hunt degree, and she did say that she was contemplating a lot of stuff regarding eternity. So her story quest seemed like the right time to do this, to explore this. But what
It's
we
like Granny
got
see the city
was
instead
a
of this dating
quest
sim
that
nonsense.
felt out of place is the best way I could put it. Her story quest, the first one, is essentially us acting way too friendly to someone who just tried to kill us no less than 2 days ago, and see her slightly changing her mind about her ideology regarding eternity, something that she has not considered in the past 500 years through dango milk, photos, and light novels, instead of, well, the damage done by the war that she let happen and the Fatui that she let run amok in her nation. And I admit it was actually important for her character development. A needed to learn that change, even in the little things, the simple things, can be good. And I genuinely think that her first story quest isn't as bad as people make it
No,
to be.
it's not.
It's not even bad.
I feel that the controversy regarding A's first story quest is a little too blown out of proportion, because there are some good things out of it. It's just that they're just a lot of the people, when they first saw this quest, they just focus on the negatives, more on surface level stuff compared to, let's say, the bigger picture. So yeah, this is definitely something worth defending.
In my opinion. It has good moments if you
Mhm.
think about it. Near the end with Kujo Kamaji and the conflict within the Tenryo Commission, we got to see her act like a leader for the first time and showing mercy towards him despite what the Kujo clan did. It humanizes her and it showed us that she indeed have what it takes to be a good leader when she's not isolated for 500 years. In hindsight, given what we know now about her development later on, I think her first story quest is just misplaced. If anything, I feel like the writers couldn't have picked a worse timing to put her story quest right after ending the Inazuma Archon quest the way they did. Her story quest just didn't provide the closure that a lot of people playing back then was looking for.
If this was treated as an Archon quest instead of a story quest, it probably would have been better. If anything, I'd probably say this might be a Act 4 quest, if anything.
Including myself. For those who don't know, the only available content right after the third act of the Inazuma Archon quest was Raiden Shogun's first story quest. So for a lot of people, it was the only story content we had going, and technically the story quest available right before her was Ayaka and Yoimiya's, which definitely had fan service and what some
Definitely.
people would call a date quest, which probably contributed to people seeing A taking a stroll with the Traveler as essentially another date quest, like similar to Ayaka's. I feel like it might be possible for people who started the game after 2.1, like a lot later, to have a completely different perception of Raiden's first story quest, given that they aren't technically forced to play her story quest right after the third act of the main quest, just because there's just so much content available now.
Yeah.
But I guess to a lot of people back then, including myself, it just felt out of place, and it's almost insulting to the players who were expecting closure to the story. No one wanted to go on a stroll with A through the city right after witnessing what she did. And
Excuse me, says who? What do you mean? What do you mean no one wanted to take a stroll with A? Says who? Says you? I'm sure there's plenty of people that want to take a stroll with A. Come on now. Come on. You're lying to yourself if you think no one wants to take a stroll with A. Come on now. I kid, but still. But here's the thing. There's a time and place for everything. I think that's what she's trying to say. So it's less about who the hell wants to stroll with A in general, and more of who wants to stroll with A right after the Archon quests. especially given the circumstances of the quest. So I imagine how this probably would help if both of the story quests for A were not story quests. They were combined together to make for one one Archon quest arc. The act, I mean. If those two quests were to be combined into one, I'd probably say it'd be received a little better. Think of it as perhaps an aftermath of Act 3. Just have A explore what Inazuma has to offer the Inazuma of today, I should say, and let her see it, and let her understand why this idea of the pursuit of eternity is something to not do, and then let her face herself to combat against this. It's possible.
And what she let happen, and seeing how Inazuma has quite literally gone to shit because of what she did. Her first story quest was essentially Hoyo versus Wei to show us that A is more than her tough warrior, unfeeling puppet exterior. She has her unique quirks, she can't cook, she likes desserts, she has all of the qualities that make her a cute waifu who is also strong and fearless, all of which would have been good additions to A as a character if not for the fact that we just spent the last few quests seeing the pain she caused and then seeing her not taking any repercussions, and how she f***ed up Inazuma because she couldn't really deal with her grief, Scaramouche, and comparisons to the other Archons. On top of everything we just went through, we later learned that A is the reason why we even have Scaramouche. Granted, his actions aren't her fault at all. Like, she isn't to blame for the atrocities that Scaramouche did when he was living as Konikuzushi and as the Balladeer. But
Yeah, not wrong. I'll agree, because by that point, Scaramouche has gained independence. So whatever Scaramouche did, that's on him. Pretty ballsy and delusional to judge your god.
what she did to him was morally questionable no matter how you
Yeah.
see it. She created a being that she knew was fully sentient, but just left him to sleep, essentially abandoning him, and then never bothered interfering even though he was going on a murderous rampage.
Yeah, morally questionable, but at that point, it wasn't even the Raiden Shogun's fault that Scaramouche became the way he is. It's just now in the creative process. On the other hand, in the creation of a Scaramouche, that's a different story.
In her own country,
To be honest, the Ye wanted him destroyed. Also, Dottore is responsible for Scaramouche going evil. Not wrong.
Scaramouche didn't just kill one or two people, he ended entire bloodlines. But I guess A just really couldn't bring herself despite discarding Scaramouche after he couldn't fulfill his purpose. But you would think someone destroying the Raiden Gokaden, a tradition so important to Inazuma, that A would at least bat an eye. But the complicated relationship of A and his son is a discussion for another day. And since the release of Sumeru and its excellent writing, A is often compared to Nahida, who suffered just as much as A, and she has been nothing but kind, helpful, and benevolent to her people, who, mind you, rejected her, kept her imprisoned, and tried to replace her with a robot. And Nahida is also a newborn Archon. She and A technically became Archons around the same time, since also died in the Cataclysm after trying to cleanse Ermental from
Oh, funny.
abyssal corruption. Even Zhuangli, who has made morally questionable decisions,
Still a better mother than Medusa from Soul Eater. Everyone, it's a better mother than Medusa from Soul Eater. Just saying.
as well, has led Liyue without failure for thousands of years. That man was responsible for building Liyue from the ground up and cultivating it into the prosperous nation it is today. Even though he also suffered extreme grief and loss when he lost Guizhong, someone who he holds very, very dear to his heart in the Archon War. Even Venti, Mondstadt's resident alcoholic and absent Archon, still cares a lot for his people, which we have seen time and time again through his story quests and also events. He has always watched over his people and has their best interests at heart, which makes A, by comparison, just a horrible Archon in the eyes of the players. So based off the Archon quests, story quests, and hidden lore, A is selfish, incompetent, childish.
Selfish, incompetent, childish. Agree on the selfish. What she essentially did is hired a babysitter just to look over Inazuma for over 500 years. She's like a deadbeat mother, so to speak. She just had someone else to take care of the baby while she goes and does something. What that something is, I don't know what. But she never came back home with the milk. She never came back home with the milk for 500 years. Incompetent? Incompetent in the sense that she doesn't really take that much responsibility as an Archon for over 500 years. I can almost agree to that. But in her mind, this is the right thing to do. This is something that she wants to do, just so that way people won't suffer the same things that she's experienced in her life. So I'm less incompetent, more irresponsible, if anything. Childish? I got no comment on that one. I got no explanation on that one.
And overall, can be a huge bitch, but
okay. Can be a huge bitch. In comparison to, let's say, Signora, Saritsa is actually the more horrible one if we take her subordinate's actions into account. It's not a competition.
that's just not true. There's so much more to her character than her mistakes. In defense of Raiden A.
Oh, your favorite part, Emil.
Here's the thing about A. She was never meant to be a leader. She was always Makoto's shadow, her body double. Her character story mentions how Makoto was never the fighter out of...
Yeah, if I remember correctly, if I remember correctly, A was meant to be... Yeah, she was meant to be a body double for Makoto, who is the real Archon, right? I don't remember what the purpose was exactly, but I sort of see this as someone who's trying to, how do you call it, take attention away from the real person. It's kind of like having technically two kings, but one actually has more power, the other one is just for show. You know what I mean? I'm not sure how to fully explain it exactly, but it's just so that way assassins wouldn't be able to differentiate between the two. Again, that's more or less how my brain would attempt to understand exactly the concept that they're trying to pull here. But that's more or less how I got it. The fact that she has flaws makes her relatable compared to the first two. To be fair, Venti's character flaw is just drunk. Just saying, A isn't the worst.
of the two of them. So A is...
Yeah, so though, getting back into this one, he drunk. The drunk. Anyway, though, regarding A, so she wasn't necessarily meant to rule over anyone. In fact, I don't think she ever had any experience in doing so. Just Makoto. But once Makoto died, she more or less had no choice but to play the part as the Archon. I would say a little bit like Farina, but honestly, it is a little more tragic compared to what Farina had. Well, I'm actually not so sure if it's even that tragic because Karina had to play the part of being the Archon, knowing damn well that she has no power at all. Whereas with A, one can make the argument that she does have power. It's just that she doesn't have the experience to rule over a nation.
Always the one in the front lines. Before the death of Makoto, A's whole world was war and fighting and killing. She was the one who defeated Orobashi when he tried to invade Narukami Island. So she was always a warrior, not a leader. Her incompetence in running a country shouldn't be at all surprising, considering that when Makoto died, A instantly freaked out and became terrified of erosion and spent all of her energy making puppets so she can prevent erosion. And then
I think Makoto not telling A the truth and basically going on a suicide mission. Maybe because telling her the truth would doom Inazuma. Probably. Not saying it won't. But there has to be a better way. Anyways, that rubs me the wrong way.
lived in isolation for 500 years. Literally, like up until the point we meet her. She didn't have time to grow into a great leader. It's not like you could learn to lead while staying in stasis. She has always chosen to ignore everything happening around her because she was so hyper-focused on achieving her goal, achieving eternity, and not having to feel grief or loss ever again. And this was always her biggest flaw.
But Nahida was a great Archon right off the bat.
So impressive, and she's a great leader right off the bat.
Well, let's not blame A for not being the wisest god in Tevad. It's not really her fault that Nahida is a wise and competent Archon almost immediately. Being wise is quite literally Nahida's biggest strength as an Archon. And even though Nahida lived most of her life in isolation, she has always tried her best in understanding humans, the human heart, which is something A has clearly not done until we meet her. I don't think it's fair at all to expect A, who is a warrior, to act the same way as the god of wisdom herself. Like, come on guys, give her a break.
If she's so incompetent, then her people should
hold her accountable. During the war, A sacrificed her life so Makoto would become Archon, and Makoto brought her back.
Inazuma should hold her accountable for all of the horrible shit she did.
And while I agree with this to some extent, it's also the reason why I think the Resistance was such wasted potential in terms of story, because they never really did anything despite being the only group of people brave enough to question and even go against the Shogun's army.
Yeah, more should have been done with this quest line. Well, more specifically, the Resistance.
And by default, the Shogun herself. However, the society in Inazuma is based on Japan, specifically Sengoku era Japan. There's this Reddit post explaining A's ideology and actions based on real historical Japan. I'll link it below if you're interested. It's a really good read. So why is this important? Why is it that just because Inazuma is based on Japan, that the people of Inazuma won't take A accountable for everything she did? It's mentioned in A's character details. If you're an Inazuman citizen, the first thing you learn is about the Shogun and how great she is as a god. Everything that happens in Inazuma is for the glory of the Shogun, and the people of Inazuma has always believed that their Archon is both wise and strong. They never knew that they had twin Archons. As far as the people of Inazuma is concerned, the Raiden Shogun is one person, Makoto. So they never really had any reason to question her leadership for thousands of years, like since the Archon War. And the Vision Hunt decree, Fatui, and everything else only happened in recent years, so it was like maybe 3 years of suffering versus 2,000 years of prosperity. So she was never going to be held accountable by her people, at least not the majority, because they just have so much faith in her, both as a leader and a warrior. I mean, I could see Kokomi and the people of Watatsumi calling her out for what she did, but we all know how badly
Yeah.
Hoyoverse handled Kokomi's writings.
Yeah, so it's like 499 years versus 1 year.
So,
She killed Kazuha's friend.
well, technically, that's very much false.
More like, well, hold on a second.
Because it was her puppet who killed him. And even then, Kazuha's friend is the one who challenged Kujo Sara
Yep.
to a duel before the throne and then lost. Hence why the Shogun puppet executed him. I'm kind of sure A wasn't even paying attention to the whole thing because the puppet was just carrying out what she was made to do. It's the same reason why the puppet executed Signora immediately after she lost to the traveler.
She was the enemy to
Kazuha's
eternity.
friend literally knew what he was getting into when he went to Tenshukaku. Kazuha himself said that his friend's biggest dream was to witness Raiden Shogun's Muso no Hitotachi, so there was no way that he didn't know that was his fate if he lost the battle against Kujo Sara. The puppet, as explained by A herself, was given instructions to always act in the interest of eternity, no matter what, which was
No matter
brilliantly explored during the Saving Grace. That was her second story quest. Her story quest, the second one, was much better received solely because I think the execution was just a lot better. Not
Yeah, even I said this in my 1 year later video. I've also stated that the second quest for A was great. It was definitely great. The quest that saved Inazuma. Did it though? I will say this. The second quest is really good. I mean, really, really good, especially considering what we had before. But the one that saved Inazuma, it's hard to say. You still have the incompetency of the resistance fighters, so it doesn't really. I can't really say that it saved the entire Inazuma quest line, but it did at least end on a better note. Let's just put it that way.
Not only did the quest have really interesting and immersive mechanics, it also builds on the things that was previously established in her first story quest and the Archon quest. Not only did the quest double down on the grief A was feeling because she lost her sister and her best friends, it also showed us that she was completely unprepared to lead a nation, and she recognizes this. A admits for the first time that she has let down her people and dishonored their memories in the pursuit of eternity. She even says herself that what Inazuma needed wasn't a fierce warrior, but someone more like Makoto, whose ideal was transience. A was the first Archon, and remains the only Archon, at least as of the writing of this video, who questioned and set aside her own ideology for the betterment of her people. And right after A has this realization, the puppet instantly thinks she was affected by erosion because she was changing her mind. And afterwards, we got to see A fight her own unshakable ideals in the form of the Shogun puppet. She's quite literally fighting in order to overcome her grief and past ideology that stopped her and in turn Inazuma from moving forward. At the end of the battle with the Shogun puppet, A mentions that she refuses to look at the puppet as a mere tool like she did in the past, which we know is very much what she used to do. The puppet in turn said that she has indeed changed for good. So, is Raiden A bad? No, absolutely not. She is just as complex as the other Archons we've met so far. It's just that she has the most obvious flaws. To compare, Venti's most obvious flaw right now is that he's an alcoholic.
Yep.
And even
Damn, that's what I said too.
then your last brain cell could probably tell that he's hiding a lot behind that facade. So that's not his full story. And the same thing with Zhongli. Nahida is a victim more than anything else, hence it's kind of hard for you to criticize her as an Archon or God because she quite literally was never given the chance to even lead her own people. And it is crystal clear that she was the main victim in her circumstances.
Very much, yeah. It's also one of the reasons why people would gravitate towards Nahida a lot more because she is a massive victim. And as for Raiden, some, especially you, Emil, would go to her side and defend the Inazuma quest line. But in my opinion, compared to even the quest from before and after, the flaws themselves are made so much more apparent than any other quest line. Even for the better moments of the Inazuma quest line, it would be hard to defend certain aspects of said quest line compared to other ones.
A was the only Archon that we got to see go through so much change and development throughout the game. We couldn't have seen her growth had she been a fully developed character like Venti or Zhongli. A's writing was always about her coming into herself and finding her footing as the leader of Inazuma while accepting that her ideology of eternity was something that her people didn't need. Her first and second story quest was about confronting her past and her past ideals, which is the only way she could move forward as a person, which convinced me that she's not a badly written character at all. She's only now started her growth, and maybe down the line we get to see more of her dealing with her past actions, and it would be so interesting to watch because A has changed so much over the past year, and it leaves a lot of room for even more growth in the future, which is something that I am looking forward to. Any Archon lore is something that I welcome. So in conclusion, I think Raiden A suffers from a bad first impression, which unfortunately is, as they say, a lasting impression. So a lot of people are under the misconception that she was just badly written because the Inazuma Archon quest had pacing issues. But that would be such a disservice to the thought the writers have put in A and her growth as a character. So yeah, that's my Raiden A video. I love Genshin's lore, and I had the idea to make this when I rewatched A's second story quest, and she says she no longer views puppets as tools, which will change her dynamic with Scaramouche significantly. Like, I can't help but wonder how he would even react if he knew A is a completely different person now. But those are brainworms for another day.
Well, that did not age well. Yeah, that did not age well at all. Especially considering what happens to Scaramouche after the fact. So this did not age that well in terms of in the case of Scaramouche, which now is Wanderer. Here's how I would interpret it as: Nahida is a victim in her own storyline, whereas with Raiden, she is a victim of circumstance. Considering what's been going on behind the scenes with the development of this game, if I remember correctly, the original writer for this quest line left Hoyoverse a while back before development came time to create the storyline for Inazuma. And the only thing that was left regarding that was just a couple notes here and there, and the writers that had to come in and develop it would need to do as much as they can and just work with whatever notes was left behind, just so they could make a good enough story for the Inazuma quest line. And I don't know if it's the skill, if it's no, I can't blame the writers on this one. I really cannot, because it is a creative endeavor, and you can only do so much with notes. It's kind of like making a 5-star cuisine out of a frozen meal. You could try your damnedest to make it work, but it really depends on how you execute it. It really depends on how well you could craft said just how you craft it, really. And then there's the issue of the business side of things, just trying to develop A's character as much as possible and as fast as possible, just so that way by the end of the Inazuma Archon quest, A would appear as a sympathetic character, as a waifu character, just so people could pull for her as much as possible. Tried to maximize as much profit as possible. With that said, however, it's really hard to say whether or not I would. Well, after watching this video, it's hard to say if my opinions were to change based on, like, what's been put into this video. Because, I mean, again, I've already made my stance on it a while back, and it really hasn't changed all that much. With that said, I am open to different opinions on the characters themselves, on like different interpretations on how people would perceive characters after the fact, especially after the fact, because how much better writing we've gotten after Inazuma. And I mean, I'm not so sure if it's thanks to Inazuma or not, but once Sumeru rolled around, we did end up getting a 5-act structure instead of the 3-act structure that we had before. There's a chance that it might have been a response to that. And because of that, we managed to get fleshed out characters. More characters managed to get their time in the spotlight, especially with Nahida and Farina. But of course, we can only say it in the now because hindsight's 2020. But for the time, it was just all circumstantial. It is unfortunate that Inazuma had to take the fall, so Sumeru and Fontaine can run as far as they could. To me, however, or just in general, the Inazuma quest line, all things considered, it could have been so much worse. It's just that the execution behind the quest line could have been better, especially now knowing how well written the quests after this one were. Because I don't doubt that this is the same team that would eventually go on to make, and by team I mean by the writing team that would go on to write for the Sumeru quest line and the Fontaine quest line, and potentially Natlan and the Shiniznaya. In terms of lore, in terms of story, they did address what was wrong with the Inazuma quest line, and more specifically A as an Archon. But they also did come up with defenses here and there, which I can respect. I can respect going against an argument with good enough arguments. So yeah, they definitely did gain my respect just for that. Now it does make me wonder though, considering the writing team behind this went on to do Sumeru and Fontaine, it does make me wonder if they're going to carry over the same level of quality that they've been displaying towards Natlan, well, more specifically the later chapters. I'm sure, but I can't help but feel, honestly, I can't help but feel concerned, especially with the way that that Fontaine was structured, especially considering how unnecessarily elongated the Fortress of Meropide arc went on for. So, good thing they summed up everything. Although the negativity left a bad impression the same way A did. First impressions are everything, and considering that the third act was our proper introduction to the Archon, I had basically had no doubt that that people would feel the way that they did, especially considering how good the first 2 acts were. The third act is where people get rubbed the wrong way. Honestly, as the first new region that isn't Dragonspine, I will always have a soft spot for Inazuma, especially the character cast. Yeah, even I can agree on that one. Which is unfortunate considering how bad they botched Kokomi, because she could have been so much better. She'll always be better in our hearts. I still use her. Well, it's a good thing then that she's as good as she is. Otherwise, no one would give a shit about her. But hey, that's again different story, different time.